April 22, 1943. Northern Tunisia. 11:40 a.m. The desert air trembles with heat. The sun hangs like a molten coin above the jagged ridgelines near Jebel Jaffa, its glare flashing against metal, glass, and the desperate eyes of men who know the end of their campaign is closing around them. Obergefreiter Karl Rademacher of the German 10th Panzer Division presses his body into the shallow trench carved into the rocky soil. Every breath tastes of dust and cordite. You can almost feel the grit on his tongue, hear the high-pitched whine of distant Stuka engines. Only today, they are not Stukas. The sound is wrong. Too heavy. Too deep. American engines. A column of Shermans is pushing across the dry basin below the ridgeline, treads grinding over stones like a slow, metallic avalanche. The ground vibrates through Karl's elbows as he watches one tank after another crest a rise, the white stars on their hulls catching the sun. To his left, Lieutenant Fritz Ollendorf swings his field glasses toward the horizon, muttering curses under his breath. His voice is hoarse. Fatigue, sand, and the slow erosion of hope have carved themselves into every syllable. "They're coming faster than yesterday," he says. "Artillery too." As if summoned by the words, the distant boom of American 105s rolls across the valley, followed seconds later by geysers of dirt erupting near the German positions. Shards of rock rain down. A man cries out, clutching a bleeding cheek as gravel tears into him. Karl clamps his helmet tighter. His heart hammers against his ribs. For weeks, the German and Italian forces in Tunisia have been constricted, squeezed by the relentless pincer of the US II Corps and the British 8th Army. Supplies have dwindled into memory. Ammunition cases that once felt abundant are now rationed like precious heirlooms. And food, especially meat, has become something whispered about, not eaten. A luxury from another life. The men fight on adrenaline, training, and the stubborn insistence that they will hold out long enough for miracle reinforcement from Sicily. But everyone knows no reinforcements are coming. "Lieutenant," someone shouts over the rising thunder of American engines, "we are nearly out of milligram belts." Ollendorf lowers his binoculars, jaw tightening. "Use them sparingly. Fire only when you see movement." Karl knows what that means. Delay, not defend. A burst of Thompson fire rips across the ridge as American infantry begins advancing behind the tanks, their helmets bobbing among the scrub brush. Voices ring out in English, commands he cannot quite understand, but the confidence in them is unmistakable. Another explosion. This one closer. The temperature climbs as flames bloom from a nearby German half-track struck by mortar fire. Men scatter, ducking behind boulders. Smoke mixes with the desert heat, stinging the eyes. "Karl! On the right flank, movement," cries Gefreiter Ludwig Brennick, pointing with a trembling hand toward a cluster of boulders where American soldiers are fanning out. Karl shoulders his carabiner 98K, steadies his breathing. The rifle feels heavier today. He fires once, twice, careful shots, each precious. But the Americans keep coming, moving with the discipline of troops whose supply lines are overflowing, whose stomachs are full, whose war effort is backed by a nation that can feed armies like factories turning out steel. "Fall back!" Ollendorf shouts. To the secondary line. The squad yanks up from the trench, boots slipping on loose rock as they race toward the next ridge. Karl's lungs burn. Sweat trickles under his tunic. Men stumble, scramble, drag each other forward. Behind them, the American tanks growl like mechanical beasts, indifferent, unstoppable. A shell slams into the earth just behind Karl. He's lifted off his feet, thrown forward. A ringing fills his ears as he hits the ground hard, vision clouded by dirt. For a moment, everything narrows into muffled sound and the smell of scorching earth. "Karl! Karl, can you hear me?" Fritz hauls him upright by the collar. Karl nods, dazed, but alive. The ridge ahead offers little cover. Not enough to hold another serious push. And as they fall into position again, dust-covered, exhausted, it becomes clear the line is collapsing, not just here but across the entire sector. Minutes stretch into an hour. The remaining ammunition disappears. The heat grows unbearable. And when the next wave of American infantry crests the ridge, a ripple of surrender gestures, hands rising, helmets lifted, moves through the German ranks almost instinctively. Karl hesitates only a second before raising his own hands. The fighting sputters out. Guns lower. Voices shift from shouts to cautious, tired commands. Don't shoot. Nicht schießen. American soldiers move quickly, fanning through the captured line. Some cover the prisoners with rifles while others wave them forward in small groups. Karl's stomach churns, not with hunger now, though that is always present, but with the sudden, visceral uncertainty of what comes next. Stories about American treatment of POWs have circulated, conflicting rumors carried by retreating troops. Some say the Americans treat prisoners decently, better than expected. Others claim harshness, resentment, payback for the U-boat war or for rumors of atrocities in Russia. Karl does not know which to believe. But as he descends the ridge under guard, he notices something strange. The Americans look well-fed. Their cheeks full, uniforms clean, canteens sloshing with water instead of precious drops rationed like medicine. And then he sees it, an American soldier tearing open a ration tin and popping a thick slab of meat into his mouth as casually as if he were back home. A full portion. A meal that could last Karl's entire squad a day. Karl's throat tightens. The smell hits him, rich, salty, heavy with calories. It might as well be perfume. The American catches him staring. For a moment, Karl freezes, expecting anger or mockery. But instead, the soldier simply shrugs, then reaches into his pack and tosses Karl a second ration tin. Karl catches it. The weight surprises him. It feels like holding a piece of civilization in the middle of a collapsing front. Eat, the American says. Just that. Simple. Calm. Karl glances at the tin, heart pounding. It is more meat in one package than he has seen in weeks. He isn't sure whether to thank the man or hide the tin in case someone tries to take it. Ollendorf steps beside him, equally stunned. They feed their frontline this much? Karl doesn't answer. He can't. His mind is still trying to reconcile what he's seeing with the starvation ration Europe he left behind. As they are marched toward the temporary holding area, nothing more than a roped-off perimeter near a captured motor pool, Karl notices more signs. American supply trucks parked in long rows, overflowing with crates. The smell of fresh bread drifting from a mobile field kitchen. Soldiers laughing as they drink ice-cold water from canisters kept somehow shaded despite the heat. And it is in that moment, dusty, dazed, hands bound behind him, that Karl understands something deeper than defeat. The Americans are not just winning the battle. They are winning the war behind the battle. The war of supplies. The war of resources. He turns to Ludwig, voice low. If this is how they feed their soldiers, Karl swallows hard. What will they feed prisoners? Ludwig doesn't answer right away. His face is drawn and tired, but there's a flicker of something like hope in his eyes. We'll find out soon enough. As the long column of German prisoners begins its slow march westward, toward the staging camps near Bizerti, toward the ships waiting to cross the Atlantic, toward a world none of them expect, Karl tightens his grip on the ration tin still hidden inside his jacket. He has no idea that what he just witnessed, a single American soldier casually eating a full portion of meat, will be only a small preview of the shock awaiting thousands of captured Germans in the POW camps of the United States. A shock so profound that many will later swear it changed their understanding of America forever. May 3, 1943. Bizerti Harbor, Tunisia. Late afternoon. The smell hits them first, salt water mixed with diesel fuel, hot metal, and the faint sweet odor of rotting seaweed trapped between the piers. Thousands of German prisoners shuffle forward in long, sunburned columns, boots scuffing against the cracked concrete of the harbor. Overhead, gulls scream as they circle the transport ships anchored in the bay. Obergefreiter Karl Rademacher lifts his eyes toward the largest of them, a grey-painted Liberty ship towering above the waterfront like a steel cliff. Its loading ramps creak as Navy crewmen haul supplies aboard. Even from a distance, Karl can see crates stamped boldly with U.S. markings. Beef, canned pork, boned milk, dry powdered. Words that feel almost unreal, as if they belong to a world untouched by war. Behind him, Ludwig Brennick exhales slowly. They ship meat across an ocean, he mutters. For soldiers. For us? Karl has no answer. He is too busy staring at a group of American military police handing out tin cups of cold water to the prisoners as they wait to board. Cold water. Not warm. Not rationed. Another spoons beans from a steaming mess tin. A third leans back, wiping grease from his fingers with a cloth napkin, an actual napkin, before taking a long drink from a chilled canteen. Carl stops walking. He can smell it. Warm oil. Meat fat. Spices. His mouth waters against his will. A military policeman taps him on the shoulder. Keep moving. Carl nods and forces himself forward. The Liberty ship looms above them now, hull plates rising higher than he imagined. The gangway vibrates under the constant flow of boots, hundreds of Germans filing up into the belly of the ship. The interior smells of metal and oil, but also, strangely, fresh paint. Everything feels new, unused, as if American industry can produce ships faster than the war can consume them. Inside the hold, prisoners are directed toward makeshift sleeping areas, row upon row of tightly packed bunks, each with a thin mattress and 2 blankets. It is not comfortable, but it is clean. It is more than Carl expected. A sailor stands on a crate and raises his voice. You will receive 2 meals per day during the crossing. Water will be brought around regularly. Stay orderly, and there will be no trouble. A murmur runs through the German ranks. 2 meals a day? On a transport ship? Ollendorf leans close to Carl. In the Mediterranean transports, we were lucky to receive moldy bread once a day. Americans, he trails off, unable to finish. The first meal arrives only hours after departure. Large metal vats roll into the hold, pushed by 2 Navy cooks. Steam rises from the lids. The smell spreads quickly, so strong, so rich that the entire hold falls silent. An MP calls out, "Form a line." Carl joins the line. His stomach clenches with a mixture of hunger and disbelief. When he reaches the serving station, he stares at the ladle dipping into the vat, pulling up thick beef stew, chunks of carrot, potato, and onion swirling in brown gravy. The cook glances at Carl, then at the tin bowl in his shaking hands. "Eat up," the sailor says, filling the bowl to the brim. Carl steps aside, staring at the portion. It is more meat than he has eaten in a week, maybe 2. Around him, German soldiers stare at their bowls, expressions flickering between awe and suspicion, as though the food itself might be a trick. Ludwig sits beside him on the deck. "Are we allowed this?" he whispers. Carl answers by taking a spoonful. It is hot, salty, heavy with flavor. His body reacts instantly, almost painfully, as if unsure whether to trust the sudden abundance. He closes his eyes. He can barely remember when a meal last tasted like this. 3 days into the crossing, the tone aboard the ship shifts. Anxiety fades into a kind of stunned stability. Prisoners converse quietly, comparing the food to their rations in Tunisia. Many admit they hadn't seen real beef since the Eastern Front, some, since before the war. Rumors spread. The Americans feed their prisoners better than we feed our officers. There is more bread in their storerooms than in all of Sicily. I heard they have camps with theaters. Actual theaters. But the most persistent rumor is the one Carl hears whispered near the forward ladders. They give prisoners meat every day. He cannot believe it. The war has taught him that meat is a thing of scarcity, reserved for officers, black market profiteers, or the lucky few stationed near farm regions untouched by Allied bombing. Every other German soldier he knows has long since adapted to a life of watery soup, ersatz coffee, and thin slices of ration pork. And yet, the 4th evening at sea, as the sun melts into the Atlantic horizon, the prisoners line up again for dinner. Tonight, the cooks are serving pork chops. Actual pork. Thick cuts, pan-seared, steaming in their trays. Carl freezes in line, staring at the serving station. Sailors laugh and chat casually as they scoop food onto plates, food that would cause an uproar in any German garrison in Europe. When Carl finally receives his portion, he holds it like it might vanish. The heat warms his palms. The smell hits him, a punch of smoky fat and pepper that feels almost indecently indulgent. Ludwig stares at his own plate. In Hamburg, he murmurs, voice shaking, "My mother once traded 3 days' worth of ration coupons for something half the size of this." Even Ollendorf, usually composed, looks shaken. So this is what the American soldier eats every day, he says quietly. This is his normal. Karl feels the truth settling over him like a weight far heavier than defeat. The Americans aren't just better fed. They are fed like a country that never knew war rationing at all. The ship pierces through Atlantic waves for nearly 2 weeks. Some days are calm, others bring storms that toss the prisoners in their bunks. But always, without fail, the meals come. Hot, large, protein-heavy. By the time the ship reaches the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, every German aboard knows one thing. Whatever awaits them in America, it will not resemble the deprivation they left behind. As dawn breaks on the 15th day, the Liberty ship glides slowly into Norfolk Naval Base. Cranes swing overhead. Tugboats churn the water. American sailors shout to each other across the docks. Karl stands on deck, eyes widening as the coastline appears, green, lush, dotted with warehouses and rail lines stretching deeper inland than the eye can follow. A new world. A world of plenty. As the gangway is lowered and guards prepare the prisoners for disembarkation, Karl inhales deeply. Obergefreiter Karl Rademacher feels the wooden planks under his feet, solid, clean, and somehow comforting. Birds chirp from the tree line beyond the camp fence. The air is heavy with the scent of wet grass, spring flowers, and something he hasn't smelled in months. Freshly baked bread. He lifts his head. A long row of barracks stretches ahead, their white paint bright against the dew-soaked fields. Watching towers rise at intervals, but the guards inside them seem relaxed, almost casual. Ludwig Brennick steps beside him, rubbing his wrists where the temporary bindings had been removed. It looks like, he struggles to find the comparison. Like a village. A strange, orderly village fenced by barbed wire. Lieutenant Ollendorf stands tall, trying to maintain officer composure, but even he can't hide the subtle movement of his nose as he senses the smell on the breeze. Bread. Warm. Yeasted. Real. The prisoners are arranged by squads and marched toward the processing building, an L-shaped wooden structure with a neatly swept porch and a bulletin board pinned with schedules, notices, and cartoon posters in English encouraging rationing and cleanliness. As they approach, an American sergeant waves them to a halt. "All right, listen up," he calls out. "You'll be registered, assigned barracks, and issued bedding. Then, dinner." He pauses, as if anticipating a reaction. "Cooperate and we'll get through this fast." A murmur ripples through the German ranks. The word dinner lands like a stone dropped into still water. They only just arrived. In European transit camps, arrival meant hunger. Days of hunger. Sometimes nights too. Karl glances at the distant chimneys near the center of the camp. Fat white smoke billows out, kitchen smoke. The scent grows stronger. He swallows hard. Inside the processing hall, the prisoners stand in lines as clerks take their names. "Rademacher, Karl," he says when it's his turn. The American corporal writes swiftly, nods, and gestures to a table where bedding is stacked neatly beside small canvas pouches. Karl receives a mattress roll, blankets, and the pouch, containing a toothbrush, soap, razor, and a towel. Actual soap. Actual bristles. Ludwig nudges him, lifting his own pouch in disbelief. "This is nicer than what we got in half-hour garrisons." A guard overhears and chuckles. "You boys ain't even seen the mess hall yet." Mess hall? The term rings in Karl's ears with nearly mythical promise. The barracks are unexpectedly spacious, long wooden buildings lined with bunks, each with a straw mattress and 2 clean blankets. Windows open to let in fresh Pennsylvania spring air. In the distance, farmland stretches out, a patchwork of greens and browns under a brightening sky. As the prisoners settle in, a bell rings. Clear. Loud. Insistent. A guard at the door calls out, "Mess hall. Stay in formation." Karl stands. His heart pounds, not from fear, but from something far more embarrassing. Anticipation. The walk to the mess hall feels like stepping into another world. The building is enormous, built from timber beams and red brick, with wide doors propped open to let the heat escape. Inside, the noise of clattering dishes and dozens of voices echoes through the rafters. And then he sees it. The serving line. Long metal counters with trays of food under steaming lids. American cooks in aprons moving quickly, replenishing pans from the kitchen behind them. Carl's eyes widen. Potatoes. Mounds of them, peeled, boiled, steaming. Green beans. Piled high like a harvest. Bread. Real white bread, sliced thick. And then, at the end of the line, meat. Thick slabs of roast beef, glistening with juices, carved fresh on a wooden board by a Navy cook holding a long, gleaming knife. Carl stops walking. For a moment, he forgets he is a prisoner. Forget he is a soldier. Forget the war. All he sees is the abundance. An American MP nudges him forward gently. Keep it moving, pal. Carl steps into line, hands trembling slightly as he picks up a tin tray. The cook glances at him. How you want it? Carl stares blankly. What? Thin or thick, the cook says. Some boys like it thin. Others like a big slice. Carl's voice catches. Thick. The cook grins and drops a generously cut portion onto Carl's tray. It lands with a satisfying weight. Behind him, Ludwig stares at his own portion with tears forming in the corners of his eyes. This is more meat, Ludwig whispers, than my family saw in a week. Behind them, a soldier from Bavaria murmurs, in a month. Ollendorf, tray in hand, studies the serving line with a look that borders on outrage. This must be a trick, he snaps under his breath. They're showing us this for morale. It can't be the regular meal. But then he notices something unsettling. The American guards are eating the same thing. Same meat. Same potatoes. Same bread. And they are eating as much as they want. Carl sits at a long wooden table, the surface polished smooth by years of use. He takes a bite. The flavor explodes, warm, tender, rich with fat. His body nearly shivers at the rush of calories. The potatoes taste like earth and salt and comfort. The bread is soft, airy, impossible. He eats slowly at first, savoring each bite. But soon hunger takes over, and he devours everything. When he finishes, he notices something else. No one is hurrying them. No one is yelling. No one is rationing. An American MP walks by, hands in pockets. If you're still hungry, go up for seconds. Carl freezes. Seconds? The guard nods casually. Sure. We don't want anyone going hungry here. Ludwig looks at Carl with a stunned, almost terrified expression. This isn't a trick. They can afford this. It is a realization more shocking than any battlefield defeat. The United States has food to spare. So much food it can give prisoners more meat in one day than German soldiers got in a week. Carl feels a strange mixture of emotions, relief, confusion, shame, awe. But above all, wonder. He looks around the mess hall, at the hundreds of German soldiers eating in silence, each wrestling with the same realization. Across the world, Europe is starving. But here, in the land of their enemy, they are full. Truly full. It is the first day at Camp Concord. And already, their entire understanding of the war is beginning to crack. June 3, 1943. Camp Concord, Pennsylvania. Before sunrise. The bell clangs through the dim barracks like a railway signal cutting through fog. Carl wakes instantly, as he always does now, conditioned by weeks of routine. The wooden beams above him glow faintly with reflected dawn. Outside, birds chirp in the sycamores lining the camp's eastern fence, their morning calls echoing softly across the compound. He sits up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The barracks smell of wood, soap, and the faint musk of dozens of men waking at once. But not the sour, suffocating odor of crowded European camps. Here, the windows are open, the air circulates, and the guards encourage cleanliness with almost obsessive insistence. To his right, Ludwig Brennick is already tying his boots, humming a tune that Carl recognizes from before the war. A civilian song. A peacetime song. You're in a good mood, Carl mutters. Ludwig shrugs. Hard not to be. It's Thursday. Carl knows exactly what that means. Thursday is Meatloaf Day. And more than that, the day the Americans serve their thickest gravy, the kind that clings to potatoes and warms the stomach long after the meal. It's absurd. It's surreal. It's comforting. Harder still to reconcile is the fact that the prisoners know the weekly menu by heart. After morning roll call, The men shuffle toward the mess hall under a sky washed pale gold with sunrise. Carl breathes deeply. The air smells faintly of dew-soaked earth and fresh-cut grass. Camp Concord employs American civilians to maintain the grounds, something Carl still finds strangely luxurious. Inside the mess hall, breakfast awaits. The first shock, weeks ago, was that every day the prisoners were given eggs. Actual eggs. Scrambled, steaming, lightly salted. In North Africa, an egg had been something to celebrate, something men gambled with, bartered with, even fought over. Here, the cooks pour them by the dozens onto hot griddles as if the supply is infinite. Carl takes his tray and moves down the line. A scoop of scrambled eggs. 2 slices of toast. A ladle of oatmeal, thick and dotted with raisins. And today, like every Thursday, 2 small sausage patties, browned and fragrant. He eats in silence, sitting beside Ludwig and Ollendorf. The mess hall hums with quiet conversation. Some German POWs speak cautiously with the American guards, others simply savor their meals. Ollendorf wipes his mouth with a napkin, another luxury, and shakes his head. It is bad discipline, he mutters. Bad for morale. Giving prisoners more food than their own soldiers ever saw. But there is no heat in his voice. Only confusion. Ludwig finishes the last of his sausage and sighs with contentment. If this is their prison, he says quietly, imagine their homes. Work assignments begin at 8 a.m. Many POWs hoped for farm duty, having heard rumors that American farmers sometimes offered extra food or fresh milk. But Carl's group has been assigned to the lumber detail, chopping, hauling, and stacking timber from a managed forest on the camp's northern edge. It is hard work. Labor that strains the back and numbs the arms. But it is honest work. Outdoor work. And best of all, it comes with rewards. At 10:30, a civilian contractor arrives with a cart. On it sit large metal beverage dispensers and crates of snacks. He calls out cheerfully, "Break time." It melts on his tongue, sweet and salty and impossibly soft. He has no idea how to respond. By noon, the men return to the camp. Lunch is served. As they enter the mess hall, the smell of meatloaf fills the air, rich, savory, spiced. Bread rolls, soft, warm, golden, sit in neat rows beside bowls of butter. Pitchers of cold milk stand ready. Carl sits with his tray, staring again at the portion. Meatloaf. Potatoes. Green peas. Bread. Butter. Milk. In Germany, this would be a holiday meal. Here. It is Thursday. He eats slowly, thoughtfully. Every bite is a reminder of a truth he cannot escape. The United States does not appear to be struggling. Not economically. Not agriculturally. Not industrially. And certainly not with food. Across the table, Ludwig says, in Hamburg, before I left, my mother boiled carrots until they dissolved to stretch them. We used breadcrumbs in soups to feel full. Carl nods silently. Ollendorf's jaw works. If the American soldier is fed like this, how can we compete? How can any army compete? He doesn't say the next part, but Carl hears it anyway. A nation that can give prisoners daily meat, can give its soldiers anything. Afternoon work ends early today. The sun leans low, casting long shadows across the yard. Prisoners have an hour of free time before dinner. Carl walks the perimeter of the camp, absorbing the sounds, distant machinery from the lumber shed, the clunk of a baseball hitting a bat from the American recreation field, laughter drifting from a group of POWs playing cards under a tree. It almost feels like the world outside the war. And that terrifies him. He sits on a bench near the wire fence. A young American guard, maybe 19, approaches with a relaxed posture. Evening, the guard says. Carl nods cautiously. Evening. The guard leans against the post. Dinner's pork chops tonight. Best meal of the week. Carl stares at him. Pork, again? Yeah. Friday is pork chop day. Carl looks away, mind reeling. Another day of meat. More than he saw in entire weeks overseas. The guard grins, oblivious to the internal shock he's causing. Our cooks take pride in it. They want to make sure nobody goes hungry, prisoner or soldier. Carl whispers, almost to himself, in Germany, hunger is the war. The guard frowns, thoughtful. Here? Hunger's a thing we beat a long time ago. Karl doesn't know what to say. Because deep down, in a part of himself he will not admit, he has begun to understand something profound. America isn't winning the war only with guns or tanks. It's winning because it has more food than its enemies can even imagine. As the dinner bell rings, echoing across the camp, Karl rises slowly from the bench. Another meal. Another revelation. And with each passing day behind the wire, he feels a part of his old certainty slipping away, replaced by the unsettling comfort of a nation whose abundance seems limitless. A nation that feeds its prisoners like kings. And its soldiers like conquerors. June 18, 1944. Camp Swift, Texas. Just before sunrise, a pale grey light smeared the horizon, washing across the endless sprawl of barbed wire fencing and low wooden barracks. The cicadas were already buzzing. Texas never really slept, and a thick, humid warmth clung to everything like an invisible second skin. Inside Barracks 14B, Gefreiter Martin Kappel blinked awake to the clatter of boots on the plank floor and the faint aroma drifting through the rafters. Coffee. Real coffee. Up ahead, Corporal Sammy Barra, their usual morning escort, watched them with his easy grin. Rise and shine, boys. Hope you're hungry. He always said that, and the Germans had long since stopped trying to decide if he meant it sincerely or mockingly. As they approached the long wooden mess hall, the smell intensified. Meat. Fried meat. Eggs. Something sweet. Pancakes? Or maybe the syrup they poured like water. Martin swallowed. No matter how many mornings he stood in this exact spot, he never fully adjusted to the absurdity of it. He remembered the winter of '43 outside Kharkov, boiling leather straps, chewing frozen bread so hard it chipped teeth. Back then, meat was a memory, not a food. Here, they served it every morning. Tension at the table. When they reached the long communal table, Martin slid onto the bench beside Heinz Moller, a stout, red-faced mechanic who'd been captured in Tunisia. Across from them sat Franz Kruger, quiet and sharp-eyed, always watching more than he spoke. Heinz jabbed a thumb at the feast spread across his tray. You know, if the Americans ever run out of bullets, they could kill us with kindness alone. Franz shook his head. Don't be naive. Everything here serves a purpose. Discipline. Control. A well-fed prisoner is manageable. A starving one is dangerous. Heinz shrugged, mouth full. Dangerous or not, I'll take danger with bacon. The men around them chuckled. Inside the mind of a POW. As the men returned to their food, Martin drifted for a moment into the soft hum of the hall. Trays clattered, spoons tapped, conversations bounced around in German and English. And beneath it all ran a shared undercurrent, a restless energy, a mixture of guilt and relief. Because the truth was simple. Living well as a prisoner felt wrong. Every full belly was a reminder that someone in Germany, maybe a friend, a sister, a child, was going hungry. Every soft bed, every warm meal, every new pair of socks issued at the quartermaster's cabin was a reminder that they had failed. They were supposed to fight. To win. To bring glory. Not to sit behind fences eating better than the infantry at the front. Martin pressed his fork into a piece of potato and watched the yellow light drift across the mess hall. The Americans walked between tables, relaxed, talking to each other more than to the prisoners. Sometimes the guards even joked with them. Sometimes they asked about Germany, about the war, about the tanks or the cities they'd heard of. It all felt surreal, an impossible coexistence between enemies. Heinz nudged him. You're thinking too hard. Eat, before it gets cold. Martin took a bite. The food really was good, too good. A clash outside. After breakfast, the POWs filed out into the open yard again. The sun was higher now, baking the earth into cracked lines like shattered pottery. Another guard restrained Franz, who didn't resist. The surrounding POWs watched, some horrified, others fascinated. Bader muttered under his breath, "Damn fools. This is exactly what the officers warned us against." But Martin wasn't sure who to agree with. Was it foolishness, or something inevitable? The pressure inside these fences was constant, building with each passing week. As the guards dragged the fighters apart, Ibarra shook his head. You boys are gonna give me grey hair before this war ends. A visit from the commandant. An hour later, as punishment, the entire barracks group was lined up in the yard under the punishing sun. The heat shimmered off the dirt in waves. The fence stretched endlessly in both directions, the line between captivity and freedom, between war and survival, between the men they used to be and the men they were becoming. Martin wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the heat settle deep into his chest. Inside these fences, the war hadn't ended. It had simply changed shape. July 3, 1944. Camp Swift, Texas. The sky was the color of hammered steel, thick with humidity after a night of pounding rain. Mud clung to boots, the air smelled of wet cedar and soaked earth, and the usually crisp morning roll call dissolved into scattered coughs and irritated muttering as the German POWs assembled in the yard. Martin pushed damp hair from his forehead, blinking against the rising sun. And try not to drop anything, those can dent easy. He winked. Heinz whispered, Is that a joke or an order? Both, Martin murmured. They set to work. The crates were heavy, dense with canned meat, sacks of flour, tins of lard. Martin's arms strained, boots slipping slightly in the mud. But as they carried the shipments into the warehouse, he couldn't help but notice something that made his stomach twist strangely. There were mountains of food in here. Shelves stacked to the ceiling with tins of stew, beans, peaches, condensed milk. Barrels of coffee. Pyramids of bread loaves arriving daily from a nearby bakery. And the meat lockers, they were full to bursting. It was like stepping into a dream, or an accusation. Franz paused beside him, breathing hard. You see it too, don't you? Martin nodded. This isn't a camp, Franz whispered. It's a feast hall. But before Martin could reply, Sergeant Briggs clapped his hands loudly. All right. One more truck's coming in. This one's for the enlisted mess, soldier rations. You'll help with that too. Heinz froze mid-step. Wait, that wasn't soldier food we just carried. Briggs smirked. Nope. That was yours. The Germans exchanged looks. In the middle of Texas. Sergeant Briggs saw the expressions forming on their faces. Yeah, he said, we eat pretty good around here. The Germans worked silently now, lifting steak crates and fruit baskets with a different kind of weight, emotional, not physical. Franz carefully lowered a box of oranges to the floor, staring at them as if they were artifacts from another universe. Heinz whispered, soft and incredulous, This is an army that feeds ice cream to its soldiers, while Europe eats charcoal. Not charcoal, Franz corrected. Turnip bread. Sometimes sawdust. Martin set down a crate of bacon and wiped his hands on his trousers, heart pounding harder than the labor warranted. It wasn't just the abundance. Just a different world. Briggs leaned against a post, folding his arms. Well, yeah. That's America. We are farmers, ranchers. Big country. Plenty to go around. He jerked a thumb at the stacked crates behind him. This is nothing. You ought to see what the frontline boys get. Martin felt his pulse skip. He tried to imagine it. He couldn't. Briggs went on, more serious now. We don't starve our soldiers, and we don't starve prisoners either. That's the rule. Doesn't mean we like you. Doesn't mean we trust you. Just means we got standards. Franz's voice broke the silence. In Germany, we were told Americans were decadent. Wasteful. Soft. Briggs grinned. Soft, hey? He spat his gum into the dirt. Well, tell you what, our boys on Normandy Beach last month didn't look too soft to me. The Germans stiffened. Normandy. The invasion. Briggs saw their reaction and his expression softened slightly. Look, war's hell. But food? Food ain't the battlefield. Food's survival. And we share it, even with enemies. He waved toward the center of camp. Now get moving before the lieutenant sees us chatting. He likes rules. The realization. Back in the yard, as they walked toward the barracks, the silence was heavy and personal. Heinz finally exhaled. I thought I knew how big the world was. Turns out I only knew Germany. Franz nodded slowly. It's not just the food. It's what the food means. Martin understood. Food was strength. Food was industry. Food was morale. Food was belief. And here, the Americans had so much of it they could feed their prisoners like guests at a banquet. Germany could not. The truth landed with a weight far greater than the crates they'd carried. The United States wasn't just winning the war with tanks and planes. They were winning it with breakfast. The fences around them suddenly felt smaller. Not because they were physically trapped, but because their worldview was. The war they thought they understood. The enemy they thought they knew. It was all different now. As they reached the barracks, the noon bell rang, calling prisoners to lunch. Another meal. Another reminder. Martin stepped through the doorway, the humid air clinging to his skin, and whispered to himself. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it was. And the truth could no longer be ignored.